Okay, so today we are unpacking a massive business drama. We're talking about the single biggest shock to ever hit Bangladesh's e-commerce industry, and it was built entirely on the dangerous illusion of a 50% discount model.
1,100 crore taka. Let that number just sink in for a second. We aren't talking about some minor accounting error here, or a startup that just kind of fizzled out. No, we are talking about an absolute fortune that literally vanished into thin air. One moment it was fueling this massive corporate machine, and the next, it was just gone, leaving an entire nation asking how a deficit this massive could even be possible.
And behind that almost incomprehensible number are 1.7 million real victims. Literally overnight, everyday consumers just lost their hard-earned money. We're not talking about high-rolling venture capitalists here. These were regular people just trying to buy a refrigerator, an AC unit, or a motorcycle. And honestly, the most mind-blowing part of this whole explainer, the founder who orchestrated this massive disappearance of funds is currently walking perfectly free, while his customers are still left completely empty-handed.
The sheer speed of this company's rise and fall is just breathtaking. Back in 2018, the platform launches with this crazy, explosive discount model. Fast forward to 2020, authorities step in and bank accounts are frozen. By 2021, boom, that massive 1,100 crore deficit is exposed and arrests are made. But then, in this wild 2023 twist, bail is granted and the brand literally makes a comeback. So we're going to walk through exactly how a platform goes from zero to hero to absolute catastrophe and then somehow back again.
All right, let's rewind a bit to 2018. Back then, trust in e-commerce in Bangladesh was pretty much non-existent, right? People were terrified to pay online. But then, this new platform swoops in with a dream offer that was perfectly engineered to bypass all that fear. They offered pay later options, and get this, up to 50% discounts on huge ticket items like motorcycles and air conditioners. It was an irresistible hook. Consumers were jumping at the chance to pre-order items at prices that were actually below what it cost to manufacture them. People genuinely thought they had found this magical marketplace.
But hold on a second. This brings us to a giant, glowing red flag waving right in plain sight. Where was the money actually coming from? Think about it. If a company is selling a motorcycle for significantly less than it costs to buy it from the factory, they are bleeding money on every single sale. It is mathematically impossible to sustain that through normal retail. If they were selling below cost, how on earth were they surviving, let alone growing so fast?
Well, the answer to that question will kind of give you chills. It was a classic Ponzi-style cash flow. Here is exactly how they pulled it off. The company would take in fresh capital from brand new customers, but instead of actually using that money to fulfill those new orders, they secretly used it to pay off old debts and finally deliver goods to the earlier customers who had been waiting for months. They were continuously robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Basically, they built a giant house of cards. You see, a Ponzi-style system like this really only survives under one very strict condition. You absolutely must have a massive, non-stop flood of new customers joining to fund the old ones. As long as that new money is rushing in, the illusion holds up just fine. But the very second that growth slows down even by a little bit, the entire thing just crumbles. There's no real foundation there, no actual profit. It's just this super delicate balancing act of debt.
And yet, everything is fine. That is exactly what the company's founder confidently assured the media and the public. He totally insisted that the business was perfectly healthy. The really crazy part? He said this literally days before the whole system imploded. It perfectly highlights the massive disconnect between the shiny PR facade of a booming tech company and the catastrophic financial reality they were hiding just behind the curtain.
So that brings us to the devastating 2021 collapse. By mid-2021, the government and the banks finally started looking really closely at this model. And like we just learned from our House of Cards analogy, the moment that extreme scrutiny was applied, the new money stopped coming in. And when the new money stops, well, everything stops. Customer deliveries were completely halted. Thousands of merchants who actually supplied the goods were left totally unpaid. A chaotic cascade of failures just swept through the whole platform, leaving total devastation in its wake.
When investigators finally pulled back the curtain, that's when they found it. That staggering 1,100 crore taka deficit. The platform that was once hailed as a symbol of new trust in e-commerce suddenly became the center of the country's biggest business scandal. Authorities stepped in and the founder, along with his wife, were officially arrested for some very severe financial charges, including fraud and money laundering. The music had finally stopped. But guys, this explainer has a pretty unbelievable twist. In 2023, the founder was actually granted bail. He walks out and immediately returns to the market with the exact same brand. Think about that. After 1.7 million people lost their money, after an 1,100 crore deficit, and actual arrests for fraud and money laundering, would people actually trust them again? Rationally, you'd say absolutely no way. But, reality is often way stranger than fiction. Because bizarrely, a lot of previous victims did choose to trust them again. Why? Well, it basically all comes down to something called the sunk cost fallacy. It's this human tendency we all have to keep investing in a totally losing proposition just because we've already lost money, and we're desperately hoping to somehow recover it. Because these people had already lost so much in the past, they rationalized that by investing just a little more, or by giving the platform one more chance, they might get their original lost funds back. And it creates this incredibly dangerous trap. You're mixing two extremely powerful human emotions together. On one hand, you have that desperate hope of recovering your stolen money. And on the other hand, there's that lingering greed for those massive, impossible new discounts. When you mash greed and hope together like that, it literally pushes entirely rational people into repeating the exact same devastating mistakes all over again. It is easily the most dangerous psychological trap in business.
So, what are we supposed to take away from all this chaos? Look, this isn't just some dramatic story, it is a literal textbook case study. Whether you are just an everyday consumer hunting for a good deal online or an entrepreneur trying to build a sustainable company, there are 3 absolutely crucial business lessons we need to pull from this 1,100 crore disaster.
Okay, lesson 1. You have to know the difference between cash flow and profit. Just because a company has massive sales volume and money is constantly flying in and out does not mean the business is actually successful. Cash flow is not profit. If the underlying cash flow isn't sustainable and there's no actual financial gain on each sale, soaring sales volume means absolutely nothing. Literally, it just means you are going bankrupt at a faster speed.
Lesson 2 is an oldie but a goodie. If it seems too good to be true, it usually is. And this applies equally to eager consumers wanting a motorcycle for half price and to seasoned investors drooling over a startup's miraculous growth charts. A 50% discount below cost price is not some genius business innovation. It's just an illusion. We really have to train ourselves to spot when the math simply doesn't reflect reality.
And finally, lesson 3. Regulation might be slow, but it is always inevitable. Sure, you might be able to operate an unsustainable Ponzi-style business model for a year, maybe 2. You might even become the biggest name in the market while authorities are still scratching their heads trying to figure out what you're doing. But eventually, the market and the regulators will catch up. Any model that's built on a house of cards is going to get exposed. The truth, well, it always comes due.
Which kind of brings us to a really provocative question. If you look around at the current market today, we've just seen exactly how this playbook works, right? The impossible discounts, the desperate need for constant new customer growth, the total lack of real profit. So I want you to critically evaluate what you see out there right now. Are there companies operating today that are following this exact same playbook? Are we watching history repeat itself in real time?
Because ultimately, history really does repeat itself. This entire explainer is basically a mirror reflecting that super fragile balance between consumer greed, blind trust, and harsh business reality. When that balance breaks, I don't care how big the dream is, those platforms can and will collapse overnight. The mechanics of these scams hardly ever change, honestly. Only the branding does. So the real question is, are you going to recognize it the next time you see a 50% discount?
I really hope this breakdown gave you a clearer, much more structured view into how this entire crazy situation unfolded. But I know for a fact this isn't the only story like this out there. What's going on in your area? Do you have a local business drama or a spectacular corporate failure that perfectly illustrates these kinds of lessons? Jump into the comments down below and let us know. We might just dive into your story in a future explainer. Thanks so much for learning with us today, and stay curious.